think a lot of bigger studios now, they are looking for a more specialist skill set. So they want a showreel that's really geared towards the area that you're specifically interested in. Whereas for smaller studios, or perhaps studios that are, working commercials, for example, they're looking for a more generalist reel.
Hey, and welcome to the VFX Artist Podcast. I hope you've been enjoying our episodes. Thank you so much for all your support. We really appreciate it. If you are watching this episode on YouTube and you are not currently subscribed to our channel, we'd love for you to hit the subscribe button. If you are listening to this episode on our audio platforms and you have the option to rate and review our episodes or our podcast, we'd love for you to leave us a rating or a review. On this episode, I have been meaning to have a VFX recruiter on the show for some time, and I am pleased and honored to have Sophie Maydon on the show. Sophie was the global head of recruitment at Double Negative between 2010 and 2017, and currently VFX Talent and Recruitment Consultant at her firm, PXL Talent. Sophie's vast experience recruiting hundreds of artists across all levels and disciplines of the VFX and animation industry gives their first-hand insights worth discovering. During today's discussion, I follow up Sophie's journey as a recruiter and get first-hand insights through her experience recruiting at top leading studio Double Negative and at PXL Talent. Let's dive in. Welcome on the show, Sophie. It's good to have you on. I've been meaning to have a recruiter on to try and understand the process of just recruiting in general and just get some advice for our listeners. So hopefully you can give us some insights about it. But before I start asking you a bit more about that, are you able to just tell us a bit about yourself and your role at DNEG and your current role at PXL Talent, right? So yeah, just tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kofi, and thanks very much for having me on. And congratulations on your podcast. You've got some brilliant guests and really interesting content. So feel very lucky to be here and talking to you. So my name's Sophie. I run a agency called PXL Talent. We're a recruitment agency for the visual effects and animation industry. We work a little bit in tech for VFX animation as well, and a little bit in games. We're a global agency, so my team is all over the world, and we have global clients. We work with studios and companies from kind of really tiny little startups that we help to build through to sort of big industry giants, and we tend to kind of focus on leadership roles really now, so supervisors and above, senior leadership teams, etc. But my team is made up of people who have come from in-house roles in studios and agencies, and we've all had experience across the kind of full gambit, I suppose, of recruitment, from working with people right at the start of their career up to the people that we work with now who are kind of at the top of their career. So, and we, our sort of main services, I guess, as an agency is to find amazing talent and place them at studios. But we take a pretty kind of holistic approach, I suppose, in terms of our service to clients. So we are not only looking for and finding people and placing them at studios, but also supporting companies with working out, what their recruitment strategy should look like, really, what they're trying to achieve with their business, and what sort of organizational structure or people that they need to be able to do that, what their recruitment process should look like, helping them to support with hiring manager training, helping to support with kind of recruitment and interview training, and also advising them on things like compensation, benefits, their employee value proposition, who they are as an employee, in terms of branding, etc. So we sort of provide lots of different services, and I think we really see our clients as being twofold: the studios that we work with who engage with us
Yeah.
to find them talent, but also the talent within the industry. They are also our clients, and
Sure.
as much as we support the studios, we also try and support um bless you. That's okay. We also try and support that talent with making the right decision in terms of their career path and what's going to be suited to them,
Yeah.
advising them throughout the recruitment process,
Right.
preparing them for interviews, and helping them with things like negotiation, etc. So yeah, that's a little bit about Pixel.
Yeah.
Uh, and you were asking about DNEG as well. So
Yeah. Yeah.
so prior, I guess my kind of start of the career in start of my career in the
Mhm.
industry was at DNEG. Prior to that, I had worked in the public sector and knew nothing about visual effects
Yeah.
or animation.
Yeah.
And I was approached about a recruiter job at DNEG, and met with the team there and just absolutely loved them and was fascinated by what they were
Right.
doing.
Yeah.
So I joined DNEG as a recruiter, and I was there for about 7 years.
Okay.
DNEG at the time was pretty smaller studio. I guess there were about 300 people.
Okay.
They were working on a project called John Carter of Mars, and so they were going through kind of hyper growth, almost doubling the studio in size
Mhm.
in about a year. And so I guess I was kind of somewhat in the line of fire
Mhm.
going into a recruitment role there, because we
Right.
were interviewing sort of back to back interviews all day every
Yeah.
day. We had a
Yeah.
really small team, and we I guess for me it was a huge learning experience, just really trying to get to grips with
Mhm.
understanding what all the different roles were
Mhm.
within the industry, what the pipeline even meant,
Right.
and
Yeah.
and trying to find suitable people
Mhm.
to fulfill those needs. But
Yeah.
I guess I sort of fell in love with the industry and the
Mhm.
people during that time, and was fascinated by the mixture of skill sets that you get from super creative people through to
Mhm.
really technical people through to
Yeah.
amazing project managers, etc.
Mhm.
And yeah, and Dina grew, and I became more experienced, and um, was became a recruitment manager there, and then eventually, as they um, built studios in global locations, became the global head of recruitment there. So I was overseeing all of the recruitment teams, and kind of defining the recruitment strategy for DNEG really, and looking at their process and approach.
Yeah.
And in that time I had two of my now three children,
Right.
and was luckily sort of promoted through maternity leaves.
Mhm.
Eventually I took on a role at DNEG as their global head of HR and recruitment and PR, so I had a
Mhm.
pretty
Yeah.
wide ranging role,
Yeah.
and yeah, came back from my second maternity leave to do that role. But I think it was a pretty ambitious task to take
Of
after
course. Yeah.
with
Of
having
course.
two little children, and I was
Yeah.
traveling a lot and working a
Right.
lot, and
Mhm.
sort of had to work out what was going to really work for me
Mhm.
and my family, and so
Yeah.
made the decision to leave DNEG
Mhm.
after about 7 years, and
Yeah.
then took a couple of months off, and then
Okay.
realised that I missed the industry too much,
Yeah.
and so I decided to set up Pixel,
Mhm.
and yeah, it's kind of really grown from there. So
Yeah.
so yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny enough because I guess we were just talking about kids and just
Mm,
yeah family life. So I can very much understand yeah how difficult I guess it was
mm,
managing yeah two kids and as you said you were traveling as well so that yeah that's like a whole another level of sacrifice of yeah being away from two young kids and yeah
mm.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think kind of working, I think working in a very global industry, in a global role, being a um, working mother is, can be particularly challenging
yeah,
if
yeah,
you're
of course,
across
yeah,
sort of multiple time
yeah,
zones. Someone sort of described it to me recently as trying to drink water out of a fire hose, and I think that's a pretty
yeah,
apt description. It's
yeah,
pretty intense. So
yeah,
so yeah.
yeah. As a recruiter, have you maybe felt the pressure of
Mm.
letting people down at different stages in their lives when they come through you, I guess, as a
Yeah, I think, I feel like, me and my team, we all feel it's a huge sort of privilege
mm,
to be involved in
mhm,
this industry and
yeah,
involved in people's careers and,
mhm,
part of giving them those opportunities. And
mhm,
yeah, there's a sort of huge amount of responsibility
yeah,
in that. I think, I guess what we're always trying to do is to make sure that that the recruitment process that we're involved in is
mhm,
as thorough
mhm,
and as transparent as it
mhm,
can be, so that um, even if people are not successful in
mhm,
the process,
yeah,
which they aren't always, um, that there's some learning in there and that they
right,
understand why they haven't been
mhm,
successful. And I think that isn't always easy at the application process. I know,
yeah,
a lot of people apply to studios and their
mhm,
policy is not to give feedback at that point, and
mhm,
there are reasons for that.
yeah,
But I
okay,
think throughout the recruitment process, in terms of if you've got beyond application in
yeah,
screening and an interview, I think good recruiters are try and give as much information as possible, so that
mhm,
if it's not successful, that that person knows why and knows what it is that they need in terms of their experience or in terms of their recruitment approach and their
mhm.
interview skills that needs to change. So yeah, but I guess to answer your question, we do you feel the weight of
Yeah,
that
yeah,
responsibility for sure.
yeah, yeah, of course, yeah. So yeah, here's a few scenarios.
Oh gosh.
Say, say a graduate, I guess, yeah, prepares to come out of university,
Mm.
and they send a generic application to a company's careers website page, um, without necessarily looking at open roles. So it's just sending a generic application. How successful would that application be? Is it quite important for? Is I mean, it should is it necessary? Is it okay for artists to send generic applications, or should they abide by what's currently on the careers page?
I think it depends on the studio.
Mm,
And normally studios are relatively open about that, I guess. They
okay.
will say, we accept speculative applications and we
Hmm.
will review them,
Yeah.
or they don't.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of specific, roles that they're
Hmm.
advertising. I think
Yeah.
probably where possible to try and apply for the openings that are available.
Right. Hmm.
And I think, often people coming out of university perhaps have specific studios that they want to work at, and
Hmm.
that's of course, like, that's natural for people to want to work at particular
Hmm.
studios. But I
Yeah.
think particularly at entry level, kind of keeping open minded as to what other studios are out there, and I guess why you're attracted to the studios that you want to go to, but thinking about, well, what other studios might be able to provide that experience for me, and monitoring whether what their job openings are. um so yeah, I don't know if that
Mm,
answers what you're saying, but
yeah.
I think probably trying to find specific job
Yeah.
openings is better. But yeah, some studios will say we
Yeah.
accept
Hmm.
speculative as well, so
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
taking a look at that too.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, my second scenario is just a job opening is being made and shared on LinkedIn.
Mm,
So who has more chance of getting the application seen between the person that goes through the job portal versus the one sending a direct message to a recruiter on LinkedIn?
mm. Yeah, that's a good question. Um, I
Because
mean, mm,
I say that because I mean yeah, for the past while I feel like job portals are a bit redundant.
mm,
I mean, it feels like we don't hear back usually when we go through the job portals compared to speaking directly to the recruiters on LinkedIn. And then usually when we go through the job portals, we just get an automated response back, and then we just have to wait, and it's usually very time consuming. You just have to wait quite some time. So
mm.
yeah, I'm just trying to understand who has who has a better chance, and what's the best way to approach it.
Well, I guess one thing I would say is that, it's good to build relationships with people in the industry, right? Right.
Yeah,
And I think
yeah.
recruiters are included in that. So
Hmm.
um, I think definitely if you see a recruiter advertising something on LinkedIn,
Hmm.
there's no danger in getting in touch with them and generally in trying to build relationships with
Hmm.
recruiters.
Yeah.
But I think maybe twofold, kind of getting in touch with them and then also applying through the job portal is good. Um, Different studios, I guess, have, you know, different levels of uh, my brain.
Mhm.
I guess they sort of have a
Yeah.
different response rate, is what I'm trying to
Right.
say. So I think, often studios will get absolutely overwhelmed with applications. And I
Hmm.
think it is generally the recruiter's best intention to kind of get through all of those applications and make sure that people have a response, and
Yeah.
understand where they've got to. But obviously, and as you're saying in your experience, that doesn't always
Hmm.
happen. So I think, yeah, probably twofold, kind of getting in touch through the
Hmm.
the job portal, but also where those roles are
Yeah.
advertised on LinkedIn, following up as well.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay. S- So, would you say that CVs are important at all for the VFX industry? Because I mean, when I started off in industry, which was 2011, it was kind of like required to have a CV and a short reel.
Mm,
But and then I've become a freelancer, so usually I go through my short reel pretty much is what's looked at, and then maybe my LinkedIn
mm.
profile. Should we still be sending CVs or work? Yeah, worrying about CVs.
I mean, I still like to see CVs, so
Okay.
I think if people don't have them, that's fine. And I
Hmm.
guess it depends how much information that you have on your LinkedIn as well, because some LinkedIn profiles that I see have nothing on them. It's just kind
Hmm.
of the roles that you've done, the job titles, I guess, that you've done at each
Hmm.
studio. Whereas other people put quite a lot of detail into their LinkedIn in
Hmm.
terms of, what the responsibilities actually look like in that role,
Hmm.
which is really
Yeah.
helpful.
Hmm.
And I guess that's what, often you would see in CVs as well, as people
Hmm.
kind of expanding a bit more on their experience and giving more information about what their responsibilities were and what I guess their capabilities were and successes were in
Hmm.
that role. So, and again, some studios want to see CVs and some hiring managers want to see them, and some are just
Right.
are very happy to look at LinkedIn. So,
Hmm.
I think if you're kind of actively looking for work,
Hmm.
and I guess at each point that you move on from a job, it
Hmm.
is probably a good idea to keep your CV up to date so that if it's asked for, that you have
Yeah.
it. But I think your LinkedIn can almost mirror that, and
Yeah.
provided that is pretty comprehensive,
Yeah.
that's probably going to be enough for them to go on.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, recently I've just started off a new position recently, and I had to send my CV, and yeah, I hadn't updated my CV for some time, so I literally just went on LinkedIn, because on LinkedIn you can export your profile as a CV, so
Mm.
you can just download a PDF and then use that. So yeah, it's interesting
What kind of
because
things do you put in there then when
I
you're?
mean, I try to keep mine quite detailed. So I put my role,
Mm,
and then I guess yeah, it's not as detailed, but usually the role, the shows that I worked on,
mm.
um, yeah, yeah, it should be as detailed as you've said. I guess, like, in terms of what I've done, and yeah, keep it more detailed. But I guess I've been
Busy.
not busy, but I guess as a freelancer,
Mm.
I usually work with same studios back and forth every now and then, switching
Sure.
studios and going back and forth. So um usually I don't necessarily need to, like, explain myself, I guess.
Mm,
So but I'll keep that in mind for sure, and I guess everyone else should, and yeah, keep that more detailed. So
mm.
yeah, would you be able to share any showreel give any showreel advice in terms of how to stand out? But I guess I know that usually, um, if an applicant is asked to come in for an interview, you usually have a head of department or supervisor
Mhm.
with you to interview them. So I'm not sure how much involved you are with reviewing showreels, but
Mhm.
if you've had that experience, are you able to just give us some advice on how to stand out?
Sure, yeah.
Mm.
I've watched a few show reels in my time. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I guess but probably at entry level, do you mean? Is that
Mhm.
kind of what's going to be the most useful?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, I think entry level, I guess again, it kind of depends what studio you're
Yeah.
applying to, and I think what different studios are looking for it is different, right? I think
Okay.
at a lot of bigger studios now, they are looking for a more specialist skill set. So they want a showreel that's really geared towards the area that you're specifically interested in.
Mhm.
Potentially with some more generalist work around that. But I
Mhm.
think um, one that focused on the specialist area that you're looking to apply for, whereas
Mhm.
for smaller studios or perhaps studios that are working commercials, for example, they're looking for a more generalist reel, because they are perhaps non departmentalized like a lot of the bigger studios are,
Sure.
and so they kind of want to see an array of skills in there,
Mhm.
within reason, I think, because
Sure.
you know, if your specialism is kind of rigging and animation, then
Mhm.
they don't you don't necessarily need to show,
Yeah.
everything else. Whereas,
Mhm.
if if your sort of specialism is lighting, but perhaps you do some texture and
Mhm.
modeling as well, I think
Yeah.
it's valuable to show on there. So I think uh, whilst you're at university or studying in whatever capacity that is, I think,
Mhm.
that's a really good time to kind of research the companies that you're interested in, look at the work that they're doing, understand, what they might be looking for, therefore, in terms of skill set, and kind of cater your work towards that. And that might mean, having different reels, like
Mhm.
having a few different reels that either focus on one area or, as I said, kind of show that broader skill set. And I think,
Yeah.
yeah, aside from that, I guess, you know, in terms of making your reel stand out, I think, one of the things you had sent me in terms of prep for this was saying, I guess,
Mhm.
one of the mistakes that you see.
Mhm.
And yeah, I don't know if it's a mistake, but I think um, it happens that often students coming out of a school will all
Mhm.
have a very similar sort of reel, and that
Mhm.
is obviously because they have been briefed on the same project often. So and at university, your professor or tutor is your client, so you absolutely need to try and deliver on the project that they've given you that's going to end up on your reel. But I think often a lot of the advice that supervisors that I worked with used to give is like, well, how can you kind of take that brief and make sure you fit what's being asked for, whilst also potentially trying to deliver something that's going to set you apart from other people, and ultimately give you something that looks different on your reel. And so I think one of the examples that they had given was like, if it's a sort of hard modeling project, everybody does spaceships and cars, and what are other things that you could do that people are not going to do? So could you do like a knight's, costume or whatever it may be? So I think, when you're studying, thinking about the fact that the work that you deliver is going to be the work on your reel, and trying to put something in that makes you stand out is good. And I think also, what a lot of studios are looking for are juniors who are self-starters and who are really curious and obviously very passionate about what they do. So if your reel has only the work that you were given as project work at university, that's not going to be as interesting as somebody who has done some of their own projects or put some of their own work onto their reel. And whilst I know studying is a busy time and it's sometimes hard to do that, I think there it will definitely benefit you in terms of application studios. So if you're at a university where there's a film course, is it possible that you could partner with them and deliver some of the visual effects for their project? Or are there other side projects that you could do with some of your classmates that are really gonna provide different content for your reel? And I think anything that makes you kind of stand out and is more interesting, I guess, it is going to be really valuable.
Yeah, sure, yeah, of course. I'm kind of jumping ahead of my questions here, but
Sure.
usually, yeah, parent or mothers take on maternity leave, and then yeah, they are possibly away for a year or possibly more, and usually sometimes they are a bit left out of the loop and out of date with what's going on. So, and then they try to get back into being an artist again and into the industry. I'm just wondering if you've had any scenarios like that, and what you'd advise returning mothers into the industry.
Yeah, I mean, I guess not to put yourself under too much pressure is the kind of
Okay.
is the first piece of advice I would give. I think any returning mothers in any industry, I think becoming a mother can be it's a wonderful and can be a hugely overwhelming
Yeah.
experience. And then going back to work, I guess not too long after that, it is basically a whole new world, right? Because you're trying to balance like having this tiny thing or things at home
Yeah.
who's so dependent on
Yeah.
you, and
Yeah.
then and then your working life. And I think also it's incredibly consuming, right, having children. So you go
Yeah.
off, you have this baby, and that's
Mm.
they suck all the attention in your
Yeah.
in your world for that time that you're off, and then you have to kind of go back to work and sort of
Yeah.
split your brain a little bit again into
Yeah. Yeah.
so I think I guess the advice I would give is like, don't put yourself under too much pressure. I think a lot I've always felt, for me anyway, and I think for some people, that when your children are very little, it's a lot about kind of career maintenance, like how do you keep going and survive this. So whilst your children are really young. So I think you know trying to work with the studio or company that you're going back to, and seeing what kind of support they can offer you in terms of acclimatizing back into work, I guess.
Mhm.
Like, are there have they got any systems set up already? Because some companies have set up kind of buddying systems, I suppose, for
Right.
women coming back into the workplace. So is that already in place? Is that
Mhm.
something that you could encourage them to do? What kind of support can they offer you
Mhm.
in terms of understanding, what they've missed whilst they've been away, or perhaps, partnering with somebody who does what they do and can kind of get them
Mhm.
up to speed on things. So, but I think, um, often I think women going back into the workplace after having children are worried about saying, I need some help, and
Yeah.
um, and
Yeah.
they shouldn't be, because it's in that company's best interest to support them. So
Mhm.
so I think asking for help where you need it, and and making the most of the resources that are available to
Mhm.
do that is, a valuable thing.
Yeah. Did you feel the need to go into part-time working mode when you came back from maternity leave? Because it's been a big topic, or at least I've been asked by mothers that are wanting to potentially work part-time. Um, there's someone I know that's a teacher, and she'd love to potentially work part time and it be work in the industry as a part time artist and be able to as well teach. And I know that it's quite difficult to for studios to allow or arrange part time working hours. So um, just wondering if if it's if it's possible to to arrange something like this, and how people could go about it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely become more possible in the last few years, I guess. I
Mm,
think, studios recognize how valuable it is to have a diverse workforce, and how wonderful
mhm.
women are, and how there should be
Yeah.
more of them in leadership roles, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
And, some women want to come back full time after having their children, but you're right, some
Hmm.
don't. And I think, there's still a long way to come in terms of things being
Yeah.
fully flexible in all industries, not just the visual effects industry.
Sure.
But I think, some studios, lots of studios now are willing to support part-time working, or job shares, or just more flexible working in general. So you as an artist, or anyone coming back
Hmm.
from
Yeah.
maternity leave, should definitely ask the question. And if not,
Right.
if the answer is no, I guess the question is why not, right? Because
Hmm.
I think um
Yeah.
yeah, it's something that most studios now will support. So
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Okay. So how has it changed with just like doing interviews or virtual interviews now compared to having them face to face as before the pandemic?
well, I really miss interviewing people in person.
Right.
And I think
Yeah.
that there's definitely much more that you get when you're face to face with someone, in terms of
Hmm.
um well, there can be in terms of kind of building rapport with that person,
Hmm.
and reading body language, and
Sure.
all of those things that you
Hmm.
don't get when you're doing a video call with someone. But I guess
Yeah.
in some ways it's been made easier, because
Hmm.
previously somebody would have to, you know duck out of work, or at lunch break
Oh
time,
yeah.
or
Yeah.
meet you after work,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
take time
Hmm.
off. And now
Yeah.
that's a lot easier. So
Hmm.
I think in terms of kind of scheduling interviews, and getting people
Hmm.
together, and I guess the fact that, you know, it makes us more global, I suppose, with with
yeah, of
everybody
course.
working remotely. I
Yeah.
think that side of
Hmm.
things, you know, has certainly become easier.
Hmm.
In terms of the actual interviews themselves, I mean, I don't think too much has changed on that, I guess, in
Okay.
terms of the sort of approach or questioning or how
Hmm.
you assess people.
Yeah.
It's just more the sort of experience of it,
Yeah.
I think.
Mm.
So yeah, that's probably the main thing that's changed.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sure. The salary expectations question.
Mhm.
I'm just wondering if that's supposed to be a trick. Are you able to yeah, maybe tell us a bit about that and like how genuine an applicant should be when trying to give their expected salary?
Yeah, I mean, I think we try and encourage our clients as much as possible now not
Hmm.
to, um, well, to ask that question, but within the
Hmm.
context of a salary band. So,
Right.
you know, I think um, sort of, I guess, fairer as part of kind of best practice in our
Hmm.
eyes, or in terms of a fair recruitment process, you know, a job has a value against it. The company knows what that value is, right? And there may be a range there,
Hmm.
um, but applicants for that job need to assess themselves against the requirement and the
Hmm.
salary, and apply if they think they match
Hmm.
those requirements. And then the job of the company is to assess, well, where do they, you know, do they match those requirements, and
Hmm.
where do they sit within that? So
Hmm.
are they at the lower end of the experience, or are
Right.
they very experienced? And that
Of
should
course.
indicate therefore where they should sit in that salary
Hmm.
band. But I think, you know, we are encouraging our clients as much as possible to be
Hmm.
transparent about that and to
Yeah.
advertise roles with salaries. And I think in the
Hmm.
US, I think in New York now, it's becoming a requirement that companies do that.
Okay.
So, but I think, you know, I guess if that isn't the case and there
Hmm.
isn't a salary advertised, obviously the
Hmm.
first question I would probably ask if I was being asked what are your expectations is, well, what is
Hmm.
the salary range?
Right. Okay.
And you know, recruiters and sometimes hiring managers may be more sort of verbally transparent about that, even if it
Okay.
isn't advertised in the in
Sure.
the job advert. But I think, you know, um, be honest is probably what I would say. You know,
Hmm.
um,
Sure.
eh, you know, either by saying, well, this is what I'm currently on, but you know, and this is what I would expect for this level of role. But I think, you know, you don't want to give a salary that is probably far above where yours is, like, you know, an
Okay.
extreme amount, sort of
Hmm.
100% over your salary,
Yeah.
let's say,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
what you want to ensure, I think, is that you're being paid fairly,
Hmm.
absolutely, but that you're not going to be brought into a company in a salary that is far above, you know, the level of the experience that you have, and that you're going to
Hmm.
be completely sort of,
Yeah.
you know, in a
Hmm.
tricky situation in terms of the fact that you can't deliver at that level.
Yeah. Of
So
course. Yeah.
I think, so yeah, I think asking the studio, well,
Yeah.
where do you value this role? But you know, ultimately being kind of transparent about your salary, or as honest as you can be,
Hmm.
is the sort of best strategy.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. I was curious why big studios try to benchmark everyone's salary, but I guess you put it down to fairness. But from my experience, usually it tends to be a bit um, incorrect,
Okay.
or at least unfavorable, if that's the word. So, is there any other reason why it's the big? Is it just the big studios just try to benchmark everyone's salary to be sort of around the same range. So
I mean, I think all studios have pay scales, right? Like not just big studios,
right.
right? All studios, will have roles and will look at the sort of junior, mid, and senior level of that role, if that's applicable, and then will determine what they're going to pay at each of those levels. Like
Right.
and big studios are the same, I guess. In bigger studios, it's more complex in many ways. You've got so many more people, but not necessarily either. I mean, I think a lot of bigger studios have been through a sort of more thorough process on that, I suppose. Potentially smaller studios may also have done that, but identifying what the role is, what the kind of key competencies of that role are, and
Yeah.
what they look like, therefore what the scale of that is and what it looks like at kind of each level. So, and I hope and I think, that's with the um objective of making it fairer, and making sure that people are paid fairly across the organization and that there's parity as well, because you don't want to work in a studio where somebody sitting next to you has the same amount of skill as you and the same amount of experience but is being paid significantly more, right? I think most studios are trying to ensure that there is parity and that there's a fair structure, and that when people get more experience, that they're rewarded for that and that they can progress their career in terms of compensation. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. What's the outset actually that takes place, and when you're recruiting, are you incentivized to find talent regardless of their rate, or are you set to protect budget over experience?
Yeah, so I think I guess at Pixel we all, that's part of what we ask, right? Of course, when we go into when we're briefed on a role, the best practice for us, or the recruitment process and what we want it to look like, we want to have a really clear understanding of what that role is. That you cannot have a successful recruitment process unless everybody is 100% clear on what
Yeah.
is needed from that role, and also where it sits within the organization. What's above it, what's below it, how do those roles interact with each other,
Yeah.
and yeah, what's the key responsibilities of the role, what's the key experience that you need to be able to deliver on that, what are the characteristics, what are the competencies, what are all of those things that you're looking for. And yeah, of course, salary is a factor in that for sure. When we engage with a client on a role, we want to understand what they're looking to pay for that role, what the salary range is, um, and and why, I guess, as well. If it's,
Okay.
are they looking to pay above market or on market or below market? Do they know what the
Okay.
market looks like? And I think that's
Right.
been a big thing for us over the last year or so. It's like
Okay.
that's been moving around a huge amount,
Okay.
in terms of what people are being paid. So so yeah, I think, and then we'll go out and look for people at that at that rate.
Yeah.
And if we find that, our experiences, that what they're asking for in terms of what they've defined that need to be, all of the skills and experience, does not match up to what they think they want to pay for that position from talking to people, then, we will feed that back and say, well, either you are going to need to pay people more, or you're going to need to be more flexible on the amount of experience that you need, and
Sure.
or the level of that experience. So yeah, so it's a kind of, you'd hope that that's defined early on in the process, but sometimes it's a
Yeah.
more sort of organic process in terms of trying to determine
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. So I guess through the the list of applications that you're being, or at least I guess the talent that you're being asked to look for, um, uh, do you see studios recruiting more artists from the mid levels up to senior and supervisors, or as well as juniors? Because it feels like, um, I guess due to the how fast paced the industry or the shows are going, it feels like juniors are being sort of neglected slightly. But it'd be good to see your point of view in terms of what your the demand that you're getting from studios, to see if there's still demand for juniors as well as all ranges of.
Yeah, so I guess we tend to focus more on leadership roles, right? So we're
Right.
looking at senior level really and above.
Sure. Okay.
Um, but to answer your question, I think
Mhm.
um, the reality is for lots of bigger studios, they are sending more of their junior work to lower cost centres. And so, there are less opportunities for juniors at bigger studios. Not all of the big studios, but
Mhm.
certainly quite a few of them.
Mhm.
But I think that there's still a lot of opportunity at kind of medium and smaller size studios who aren't necessarily taking the same approach. And actually going to one of those studios can be a great experience for someone at the start of their career. They might not be working on the biggest shows, right,
Mhm.
necessarily, or
Yeah.
have a kind of formal graduate
Mhm.
or entry level training process that they go through.
Yeah.
But medium and smaller size studios are often are a brilliant sort of pace to learn as a junior and get exposure to working with people across all different levels. And so yeah, I think that there has definitely been there are definitely less of the typical entry level roles, I guess, than when I started
Mhm.
out in the industry, but that
Yeah.
doesn't mean that there aren't opportunities. Um
Right.
so yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Does
Yeah.
that answer?
It does. Yeah. It does. Yeah. I recently just had became a mentor with Access
Great.
VFX. And the first question that my mentee asked me was whether to go to university or try and find work into the industry.
Mm.
Um, I don't know. Would you have any advice on that kind of question? It I've struggled to answer that question because it's there's a lot of many ways to go about it. So I'm just wondering if you have any advice.
Yeah, I think I struggle as well, as well, really. I think, like having a degree and university, I guess, there's the sort of paper aspect of it, right?
Mm,
It's
yeah.
having that on your CV or on your LinkedIn profile if you don't do a
Mm,
CV anymore.
yeah.
And but it's also, you know, aside from it being about just thinking about vocationally kind of getting into the industry and
Hmm.
getting a job, it's also an opportunity to kind of explore what you're interested in, right?
Hmm.
And to give you the time to do that.
Hmm.
And so, there's so many, I guess there's different paths that you can go down. If you go and do a visual effects animation degree, or then you may go down an artist background, or you may find the specific area that you're interested in, or you may find you're interested in lots of areas and you kind of got the time
Hmm.
to sort of play around in that sandbox,
Sure.
I suppose. But you also
Hmm.
might find that you really like, you know uh, helping to organize the team, and actually production is your
Sure.
calling. So I think
Hmm.
going to university, gives you the opportunity to do that and to sort of
Hmm.
explore a little bit more, I
Yeah.
suppose. But I
Hmm.
guess it's also a good opportunity to kind of network and meet people. Um, and that's not to say that you can't get that experience yourself,
Hmm.
but I think
Yeah.
a lot of courses facilitate that for you and
Hmm.
give you the opportunity to work on industry projects or meet with
Hmm.
professionals, or So so yeah, I think, you know, provided you make the most of that opportunity and, you know, use it to your advantage, university can be a great path. But I guess we can't deny how expensive it is now for people to go to
Sure, yeah,
university, and that
of
isn't
course,
always
yeah.
the option. So
Hmm.
you know, I think a lot of studios have also set up apprenticeship schemes. So, you
Yeah.
know, that's another option, is to go to a
Hmm.
college
Yeah.
and go through the apprenticeship scheme, which has been really successful. And then I think there's, you know, other studios who have set up particular schemes that are, you know, not for people coming from courses,
Hmm.
and give
Yeah.
them the opportunity to get that experience. So I don't know that there's a sort of set
Hmm.
path, and I think you can always find people who have, you know, had the experience of going to university and, you know, can't imagine that they would have done anything else, and other people who have kind of made their own way about it. I guess
Yeah.
potentially that's, you know, you have to be incredibly sort of self-motivated to do that,
Yeah.
and be able to
Yeah, of
knock on
course.
a lot of doors, and, you know, get a lot of pushback, and find
Yeah.
your way in. But I think, yeah, there's definitely different ways and different approaches. I think, you know, as you say, it's quite
Mm.
difficult
Yeah,
to
it is.
answer. You studied at Ravensbourne, did you? I
I
think.
did,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I did, yeah.
And did you find
Yeah.
that yeah, what did you find of that experience? Like, was
Um, yeah, I mean, I enjoyed the process. I think I made a great friends and great friendship. And I, during my time at uni, I I decided to specialize in like 3D modeling, for example. I mean, I was able to explore in, like you were saying, in all different fields of the industry, like animation, lighting, and all of the fields. And I was able to choose to specialize in 3D modeling. And then, of course, when I came out and started working, I changed the my specialism, the department that I went into. So, but I was lucky enough that the tuition was not as high as it currently is. Um, so when I was asked that question, I was partly thinking about the tuition because it's quite high, and it's quite a high burden to take on. Um, but otherwise, I would totally recommend university. So yeah, yeah, yeah. Big question.
Oh gosh, I feel like they're all big
Yeah.
questions. Go on.
All right. Okay. Yeah. Do you think there are discriminatory factors during the recruiting stage or process? Yeah, I guess either at your time at DNEG or at Pixel, or in general, I guess. Do you think there are any discriminatory factors, maybe in terms of um, experience, or uh, yeah, an applicant being favored based on them being male or female, or just any type of discriminatory factors?
I have not personally experienced that, right? But it does. That's not
Hmm.
to say that it doesn't go on, for sure.
Mm.
I think, but I think the industry, like lots of industries, is changing. You know,
Hmm.
um, in a positive way.
Yeah.
Um, you know, diversity or EDI or DNI, or, you know, wherever you are in the
Hmm.
world, whatever it's called,
Yeah.
like, is becoming something that's much more openly talked about,
Hmm.
and that studios are holding themselves accountable for, right?
Hmm.
And are looking at their recruitment processes to make sure that they can kind of you know, ensure that they're fair, and weed out anything that's going to
Hmm.
not make them fair. And I think, you know, lots of studios are giving their recruitment teams and their hiring manager teams unconscious bias training, or other types of training around that hopefully where there is any of that kind of discriminatory behaviour or has been, where that will look to change it, and I guess so that people are more aware of it. I think we at PXL, we're always trying to, I guess, focus less on discriminatory activity, but focus more on, well, how can we overall make the process fairer for everybody in general? And what are the
Sure.
steps, what are the things that we can advise our clients on in order to make sure that their recruitment process is fair? And for us, that in terms of that advice, it's going back to what I was saying before. It's like, what is the job? What do you need people to do?
Sure.
You have to be very clear about that. And I know that sounds like a really simple thing, but actually you would be surprised how many companies
Yeah, of course.
struggle
Yeah.
to define what it is that they actually
Yeah.
need. And then,
Yeah.
how are we assessing people against that? And I think historically, a lot of studios perhaps had a more informal recruitment process. And I think that you can still have a kind of warm and engaging recruitment process without it being very informal. Because the problem with having a really informal recruitment process is that it's really difficult to assess people against each other, like for like, right? If you're not asking the same questions and you're not assessing people in the same areas, then how can you know whether they
Yeah.
are the right candidate for the role? So
Sure.
for us, we encourage our clients to have a more formal recruitment process and to standardize that, I guess, and make sure that it's consistent. Because if you're asking candidates the same questions on the same areas, that's how you can really work out who's going to be best placed to do the job, and that avoids there being any question around whether the recruitment process was fair. So yeah, I think but I'm sure there are a lot of people where that hasn't been their experience, and they have felt that they haven't been fairly assessed throughout the recruitment process with companies.
Yeah. I mean, actually, talking about that, I was wondering what you think about in terms of fairness between I don't know, someone recommend, like, I don't know, recruiters either going back to artists that they've previously worked with instead of maybe giving someone else a chance, or maybe an artist from a studio recommending someone directly to the studio, and then the outside applicants not getting the chance to be seen.
Yeah,
So
I
yeah.
think there's total value in asking for recommendations, right? Because um you if if somebody who has worked with someone who's exceptional like in their
Yeah.
craft,
Mm.
then it's really valuable to know that. If somebody's recommending
Yeah.
someone because they like drinking in the pub with them, then that's completely different, right?
Yeah.
And I think,
Yeah.
you have to open your recruitment process up, right? Take recommendations for sure, but also look at people who have applied directly, and weigh that up against each other. And I think, weigh those people up against each other. And when you take recommendations, really understand what the reason is. Like, is that person able to give really constructive feedback on why that person is the best,
Sure.
person for the job? Like, can they
Hmm.
refer to specific things in the job requirement that
Yeah.
that person matches up to? Um and how does that compare to other people that you have seen? And um so I think, having as open-minded as approach, I guess, to your
Hmm.
recruitment process, and not just taking recommendations, because
Hmm.
you know there um there absolutely can be an element of kind of unconscious bias in that, for sure.
Hmm.
Like, if it's just purely everybody who works at the studio is friends with everybody else, it's like,
Hmm.
how do
Yeah.
you actually bring more diverse people in?
Yeah.
So
Of course.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Great. Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, I feel like I've asked you almost every question that I had in mind. But yeah, I guess for anyone watching, I guess if you have any questions, you can just let us know. Yeah, send us a comment, I guess. But before we finish off, can you tell us how people can um come through Pixel Talent, and just like, and as well as if you work with just UK artists or Europe as well as, yeah, it'd be great.
Um, so we don't have a website at the moment, but we have one coming
Hmm.
very excitingly in the new year. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
we'll be advertising a lot of our jobs through opportunities through that. I think
Hmm.
um, if you would like to talk to someone from the Pixel team, we've got a LinkedIn page, so you can find us on there, or you can get in touch with me.
Hmm.
We are all about, trying to build relationships with people and get to know people, and hopefully help them in their kind of career journey. So we're really open to having a conversation with anyone
Hmm.
about their sort of career development and what they're looking to achieve. We work with artists, all over the world, artists,
Cool.
producers, operational people,
Hmm.
anyone in the industry, basically. So,
Sure. Okay.
um, and yeah, as I mentioned at the start, I have a global team. So, either you can talk to me or someone in the team
Mm.
who's in your kind of global region as well. So,
Mm.
hopefully that helps.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. I mean, before we end it, I was gonna ask
Yeah.
you if you've what's the worst um trait that you've had from an applicant, and I mean, oh, maybe what should people not do as as applicants?
Um, I think, I don't know, assume you know everything, right? I think that's the
Right.
worst, the worst trait. I think,
Yeah.
you know, thankfully there are not many people, hopefully, in the industry who are like that.
Mm.
But I think, one of the things that I love about this industry and the people in it is that it's all, it's ultimately all about innovation, right? And everybody in
Mm.
it are people who are on that ride of, like,
Mm.
wanting to learn more and do more and
Yeah.
work out, the
Hmm.
direction that things are going. And some of the best people that I've worked with, even at a super senior level, are
Hmm.
feel that they are still learning and that they are
Yeah.
learning from everybody around them, right from the
Hmm.
most junior people that they manage through to
Yeah.
the people that they report into. So I think um not being arrogant and
Hmm.
understanding, the wherever you're at in your career, that you have a lot to learn. And um you know the you, that you have a lot to learn from other people, I think
Hmm.
is important. And I guess that's something we're always sort of spidey sense looking out for, is, is people who are not like that. So
Sure.
yeah,
Okay.
I guess that's the sort of biggest thing.
Mm. Okay. Great. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time, and yeah, for giving us, I think, these amazing nuggets, and I think they'd be quite useful for everyone, and for, yeah, anyone looking to make their next application. So thank you so
My
much.
pleasure.